The other day, a friend of mine was talking about how there's a tiny percentage of people who go after their dreams and sustain that goal. And I really think there's a moment where I was terrified to be broke.
I know someone that said the period between not having a job and not knowing what you were going to do next was one of the best feelings at times, aside from the scariness, the uncertainty, but there was this freedom in it of not knowing where they were going. It reminds me of that. You said you didn't want to really know, you just want to be led, and I just thought that was great. So.
Well, I do have a thought on that, and that is I'm working on the 4th feature film now, so it'll be 4 features and 38 short films, and I do feel that in between projects I fall into a depression. That I feel like, for me, it's not about putting the movie out. That is what I'm doing it for. It's really to be immersed in the creative process. I feel so lost when I'm outside of actually making a project. And yeah, so I feel like there is a part of me on a personal level where as soon as I'm getting to that tail end of being done with something, I need to be immersed in something else. And the festival stuff is great, and going out and talking to people about the film and showing the film is what it's about. It's exciting to hear people's response to it, but there's something so much more fulfilling to my heart and my soul if I'm truly in the middle of creating something, juxtaposing images, which is one reason why I end up wearing so many hats on the movies, why I end up editing, doing sound design, mixing, color grading. I have a pseudo name I do stuff under named Sander Hamilton. So sometimes I won't put my name as a colorist or this or that. And I have amazing colorist Joshua Duncan, who I've loved working with over the years. But sometimes it's hard for me to step back from something. Unless I have another project lined up, then I can hand stuff off. So I love to collaborate. I love to work with people. But I have to be immersed inside that creative moment, and I fear not being in there, honestly.
Do you think being lost, though, is a negative thing? Because it leads you to start new projects where a lot of people could give up and be, oh, there's no money in it, I don't want to do it, this is all rigged. But it seems like you have this curiosity, and that being lost is actually in some ways a positive because it propels you.
The truth is that filmmaking saved my life. So there's a complete honesty in the fact that if somebody's looking at filmmaking and thinking there's no money in it, right, then they're maybe not meant to be creating, because money comes and goes, right? And no matter what, you're always going to have these bottom of the barrel moments. The other day, a friend of mine was talking about how there's a tiny percentage of people who go after their dreams and sustain that goal. And I really think there's a moment where I was terrified to be broke early on. I mean, that just inevitably in all of us. None of us want to be evicted, and we're all terrified. But then at some point, I felt myself break through that barrier of fear and became comfortable within that terrifying notion of feeling lost within our society. And the real truth is, I feel like a lot of people are really terrified to take that next step in, but that might go back to the idea that our whole system, the school system, everything is kind of built around follow this path and you'll be okay. Follow this path and pay bills. Follow this path, get married, do this, have kids, go to college. And it doesn't really propel people to go after the randomness of your dreams, because there's no straight path. When you look back at everything, when I look back at April 23rd, 2006, the day I started making films, when I look back at that moment, it feels like a straight path now to get here, but it's really going all over the place to try to sustain myself and get to this point. But there's a comfortable side of struggling as an artist that at some point, I really strongly believe thoroughly that the more you don't worry about your finances, the more things actually just come to you. It's when you feel this fear that you push against these possibilities, I feel. But, it's not for everybody. It's definitely a struggle, and there's a lot in filmmaking that can be very difficult to sustain and keep pushing forward. Especially when you're faced with the whole society of Hollywood standards of the American dream, people making a ton of money from, a project and looking like overnight successes, where really most of those people that were overnight successes really had been making films for a decade.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
And going back to the following the straight and narrow path
Yeah.
of the sort of the corporate 9 to 5, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with
course.
stability, especially if people have kids.
Yeah.
But you can be pushed out the door, and it can be a rude awakening. That was the beautiful thing about the Jim Carrey documentary, talking about his dad and how, you know, he'd sacrificed and then in his 50s was let go. And so that can happen too. So you kind of decide, do I want to follow things now or do I want to wait? And for some people to wait, that's totally fine, you know?
It is. And everybody has their own paths in life, and there is no right way. Really, feeling happy is the most important element to every life. And there's nothing that's going to bring you happiness, money or fame or any of that is not going to create happiness. But I love what you mentioned there of Jim Carrey, because it's so true in what he said. And he talked about this in his commencement speech. And I've watched it over and over and over. Every once in a while I put it on while I'm cleaning my apartment and just listen to it. And he talks about how his father was let go from this safe job, so he taught him a couple things in life. One, that comedy was the best currency, and then the other one was you can fail at something you hate doing, so you might as well fail at what you love.
What's your reaction to this statement, PM? Being an artist isn't what you think it is?
It's true. This is something that is just complete honesty. I was born an artist, and unfortunately, that was not the best thing to be in Hamilton, Ohio. That's where I'm originally from. Because being an artist, you see things differently, and you do things differently. And unfortunately, from my childhood, I stood out because of that factor. So it was better to actually fit in than to stand out. And I think there's this kind of romantic notion to being an artist, and this idea that, you know, it's maybe self-exploratory action creates some kind of romantic notion that you're living your life in a more beautiful manner than others, perhaps. But really, there's a lot of chaos in the mind, and I think that chaos drives people to become an artist, and maybe drives them to a point of trying to understand why their mind ticks the way it ticks. And that's not really something a lot of people actually want in their life. We want to feel like we're in this romantic place, and everybody wants to feel like their lives are a little bit better than other people's lives, but I think that might be social media causing people to look at a curated version of everybody else and wonder why their curated version isn't on the same level. But every day is a struggle for everyone. And I think Basquiat, one of my favorite painters of all time, I think he had a really deep struggle every single day, but yet he became incredibly successful with Andy Warhol as a mentor. And but one thing that Rob Pryor says is you wouldn't want to be inside of his brain, you know, and it's a hard place to be, and there's a struggle, and every day you have to get up and face the fact that you're pushing forward. I love life, and I think being optimistic is the best notion forward. And whether you're an artist or not, it's really incredibly important to find your slice of happiness. And it's not super difficult. First off, the number one thing to being happy is being really content with where you are. My dad, he studied a lot of Buddhism, and he taught me a Buddhist law when I was growing up, and that is you have to navigate from where you are, not from where you wish to be. And that, I think, translates to everyone in every situation. And even the person living in a tent on the street, they still actually have something to be grateful for. And then that drives the energy in a positive manner, and I think people are attracted to positive energy. If you live in that negative bubble, it pushes the people away from you and the opportunity.
And I think negativity and positivity, it can ebb and flow, you know. I think it depends on what's going on in your life, what's going on in the world. We're exposed to things on a 24-hour news cycle that can really affect us, and seeing these images. Were you always so optimistic?
I think in my early 20s, I was quite pessimistic coming out of my youth, trying to find my foothold. Why April 23rd, 2006 is a day that I remember, the day that I decided to start making movies, is I started to feel a part of something for the first time in my life. Before that, I had skateboarded and thrown myself downstairs unrelentlessly and wasn't really too worried about my own physical health. Once I started making movies, I found myself. And actually, even more recent, once I really found my voice with these newer pictures, these poetic tales that I'm putting together, I suddenly feel more a part of something than I've ever felt. So being optimistic is a daily challenge. It's a choice. It's definitely a choice. For instance, somebody cuts you off on the street. You know, our first inclination is to be angry. But you could also tell yourself, what if that person's wife is pregnant, giving birth in the back seat, and they need to get someplace very quickly? We kind of decide to put this negative spin on things. And I think that's just the human condition. All of our minds go down that path. And it's up to us to try to navigate our own headspace to find a way to bring the optimistic side out in all situations. Honestly, earlier, a friend was really angry about this package not arriving on time because it had some medical instruments in it and they needed to go into a surgery. And this person came from San Diego to go to a surgery in Beverly Hills. This just happened this morning. And she was quite perplexed and upset. And then it came about an hour and a half late, and I tried to tell her immediately, it could have come at 3. The person's not even hardly behind schedule. And later on she got there was no chaos, nobody was upset. And she thanked me for trying to keep her in a positive place because it's so easy to spiral.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a useful side of that tale because there's situations and everything. But I feel like any of us in the United States, right? There's so much war happening everywhere else right now. So much war. We feel so stuck by our own situations in life often. And if you just look a little bit to the left or right, you realize that really what we feel stressed about is going to pass. I love, one way that I stay optimistic actually, is I like to focus back on different moments in time where I was stressed about something different and realize that I had gotten through that and that actually didn't rule my life any longer, that little stressful bubble. And then it makes me I come to this deep realization in that moment that this moment I'm feeling I'm going to pass. I'm going to be on the other side of this stressful moment.
Sure. And the good passes too. I know
Yes.
there's a wanting to feel, sort of on cloud 9 all the time. And as artists, we can ride sort of this roller coaster and thinking that, oh, this is never going to leave us and we're always going to feel great. And then when the down comes, it's even worse because it's almost like, see, I knew life was going to fail me again.
Well, see, the thought of that right there, see, I knew that life was going to fail me, like that's the negative mindset. That's actually the mind driving us to this place, because the truth is that you shouldn't look for the good or the bad. Really, I think the life hack that I've learned is to-do lists, believe it or not. Like there's actually a side of just continuously progressing. That consistently keeps you feeling grateful. And it's like this to-do list. Like I have a to-do list every single day. And every time I check something off, it gives you a little tiny chemical reaction to the brain. And the truth is say you win a giant accolade in whatever your business is, right? That's fleeting. You're going to feel great that evening. By the next morning, you're going to be curious about why you feel down. And the reason you might feel down the morning after winning something is you had such a giant emotional outburst of energy that now your body's needing to recuperate and rekindle that energy. So we're not living for the really high moments, and we should not live for the very low moments, but understand that life is this roller coaster where you're consistently living somewhere in the middle is the happiest space you can live. And I swear to God, to-do lists take you to that place every day. It really does. It's just to check a couple things off and you're like, oh wow, hey, I'm succeeding today. I have a little post-it note on my computer and it says, never have a 0% day. And that could be the smallest thing that you do. Coming here today, and then leaving after this and Okay, I did that today, and give yourself the leeway to not have to overperform. We live in this society that says you need to be working 8, 10-hour days. The billionaires work so often, and Elon Musk, these 60+ hour weeks. And that's not really gonna get somebody. I mean, say you get $1 million tomorrow, does that make you really happy? You might feel that feeling of relief that you have all this money in the bank for a couple of hours. And then you still are dealing with people that might get sick in your life or all kinds of factors. I think it's feeling content with who you are in the moment is the real challenge. And no matter where you are in life, that's always going to be the challenge. And so I always think back to yesterday and think, can I be better than I was yesterday? And then you have to be open to really critiquing yourself, really critiquing your life. Where could I have been more open-minded? Did I lose my temper? I'm not a religious person, but I have a Christian music radio channel on. And so if I start to feel this kind of burst of energy while driving, because in LA there's so much traffic and road rage is just on the side of us at all moments. It's just, we're so close to just always losing our cool. I'll just hit that channel because it's how can I be mad and start yelling at cars if I have this music on in the background? I'm not saying that necessarily helps, but I think it just goes to show that everything is a struggle and you're trying to navigate your way through it,
That's interesting. I used to listen to one too. I'm not religious either, and I wasn't raised religious, but there was one that had a call-in show, and it was so fascinating, and it was just to hear these different, people's problems, and I would also listen to one. So yeah, that's fascinating.
There's something calming in those channels because they don't take ad money from negative sources. So you don't get hit with commercials that might put weird thoughts in your head.
Sure.
So there's so much of that weird propaganda out there.